Welcome back, my friend. This is We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling, where I give you the tools and skills you need to love better so you can live better. I spent last weekend at my nephew's wedding. He is the first in his generation of my family to get married. Throughout the weekend, I couldn't stop circling back to how young he is. He's 25 years old. I don't mean young in the sense that he's too young to get married. I mean, people his age and younger have been getting married since the beginning of time. But historically, we didn't live as long as we do now. Marriage today is a very long partnership, half a century or more if you do it in your 20s and you're lucky enough to live out the average lifespan of an American citizen, which in 2020 was 77 years old. When I think about it, the intended length of that commitment, I wonder how reasonable it is that in the West, we expect people to make that promise regardless of age. Because what happens when we make a forever commitment is that quite naturally, we relax. We get comfortable. The safety and security that comes with a long-term commitment will, over time, cause us to stop trying as hard. And for most people, that provokes a slow decline in several critical areas of life. Over time, most of us aren't as diligent in our self-care. We're less careful about how we interact with our partner, more likely to be ourselves, which is really code for just getting lazy and failing to use our relationship skills. And when you stop using your relationship skills, your disagreements, they don't get fully resolved, which is how resentments start. Schedules start to take over. Life gets real busy. Maybe we start having kids. Whether we do or not, we usually stop dating each other over time. And you can find yourself feeling like two people who co-manage a home and a family rather than two lovers who committed to showing up for each other intimately. I am going to use a very unromantic analogy here. Making a long-term commitment can be a little like a teacher who gets tenure. You just don't have to try as hard because you don't have to. You got job security. There's no meaningful annual review because with tenure, you know they can't fire you. And with marriage, the emphasis is on the commitment. It's on the vows, not on how each of us shows up. Over the years, I have often thought that we would be so much better quality partners if our commitments were shorter, if they were time limited, if instead of promising forever, we made micro commitments, 3 years, 5 years, pick your interval. That way, there's an incentive to keep working at it, to keep trying, because both partners know that there's a date by when they're going to meet to reevaluate how happy they are, how compatible they still are, how fulfilled they are. When you think about how much humans change over the course of a lifetime, is it even reasonable for us to not expect to outgrow each other? Why is it a failure if you have a good solid 3, 5, 10 years together? I think Westerners are painfully unimaginative when it comes to relationships. I think there are different ways to enter commitments that don't result in a pass-fail outcome. Till death do us part is just a long fucking time. Here to help me with what is likely to become a very lively debate is my niece and co-host, Ashton Tardif, who is a hopeless romantic and younger than me. So her hopeless romanticism, it just looks a little different. Hi, Ashton.
Hi. It's so good to be back.
I miss you so much.
I miss this so much. What exactly is a micro marriage? And how would it be different from a traditional commitment?
So the way I see this in my imagination is two people who are like really happy and they want to take their long-term relationship to the next level instead of promising forever, which hasn't worked out well. We have a 50% divorce rate at any given moment. They make a temporary commitment that is time limited, and then they reassess at that date to see if they want to renew it. Here's the thing, Ashton. I don't get why we keep doing the exact same thing as a society over and over and over again hoping for a different outcome. If someone told you you had a 50-50 chance of coming out of a medical procedure and being alive, you would really hesitate to enter that procedure, I would think.
Yeah.
So to me, a micromarriage could be a way to lower the divorce rate. I mean, you understand divorce from the perspective of a child, and I'm happy to hear your feedback about that. But it's so all consuming. Like, it is so terrible for society, for both partners. I mean, economically, it is at best an off ramp for one partner in their economic consistency and can often be a pathway to poverty for one or both partners. That doesn't even touch on like the emotional toll it takes on one or both partners. I mean, I don't think anybody gets through divorce very easily. And then there are children who have to deal with divorce and have to accommodate it and
Yeah.
transition to it. And I just think that if it behooves us to examine the way we do marriage, considering that when it goes bad, it it impacts so many aspects of our life, not to mention so many other people.
But I want to go back. So when I asked you what exactly is a micromarriage, you mentioned it's more like, I guess, a trial, like a trial run of marriage. But if you're already in a long-term commitment, aren't you technically kind of already doing that?
I'm saying that we should have a legal process by which people can do
Oh,
this, like literally a legal
like
process.
a lease,
Mar-
like a rent?
I'm like a rent to own situation. Not even. No, I just think that like most contracts are time limited.
Right,
I don't fucking
right.
know. Let's just be real. That
No,
is
that
not my
makes
lane.
sense.
I kind of think I might be right. Uh, but like most commitments that we enter are time limited.
Yeah,
Why is this not? I mean, think about how much we change decade to decade.
yeah.
I am such a better version of myself today than I was at your age. Such a better version of myself. I would argue that most people my age would say the same. I know that your mom feels like she's a much better version of herself today than she was in her 20s.
Hmm.
I don't want to speak for her, but like most people I speak to uh, that are contemporaries of mine feel like they could have made so many other relationships work if they had the skills today that they have and had them decades before. We're just
Hmm.
easier to deal with, and we know how to navigate problems better. And but that comes at the cost of changing. And when we change throughout our lifetime, if our partner is not down with that change, which is so often a positive change, then what? The relationship has to end because we what? We outgrew each other. That's what we
Yeah,
say. I just think this allows for the possibility that, you can have a shorter, great run. Why does it have to be, you know, till death do us part? That just seems so overwhelmingly long.
yeah. It also creates like a forced check-in. Like, hey, are you happy? Like, are we happy? Is this going the way that we like thought it would? Um, yeah, I mean, I'm so not opposed to this concept at all.
I'm so
Um,
surprised.
no, I mean, ideally, everyone wants when they get married for it to be forever, and they know it's not going to be easy, but like you want a forever. I mean, like you said, I'm a hopeless romantic. I do hope when I find quote unquote my person that that's it for that for the rest of my life. I don't want to have to keep doing this,
Mhm.
um, but it's not quite realistic. And why would you stay in something if you're actually unhappy, if you're doing work and you're trying and you're becoming a better person, what is the point? It's like a job. You should leave the job. You can still make money elsewhere. It's not like the end of the well.
And that's
So
just the thing. I think that when we know that there is a check in, I think it brings out a better part of us. I think we try harder.
yeah. It's like when you have a work your evaluation or like you're like, well, I better kick it into extra high gear,
The
the
three
months or
months
so.
before,
Yep.
absolutely. Everybody
Yep.
does it.
Yeah.
Everybody does it.
It makes complete sense to me. So, are there psychological benefits to having a micro marriage, besides the fact that you may feel like you have to step up your game before your quote unquote contract is up?
Well, that's basically how I envision the psychological benefits playing out because humans feel better when we're motivated.
Mhm.
And micro commitments are inherently motivating because we know that we have to work to keep that relationship. People perform better and they feel better when they shower and they dress and they put themselves together for work. The same goes in our personal life. We think we want the comfort and security of not needing to put forth effort. That's kind of one of the positives to having a long-term commitment, but the research just doesn't bear that out. It doesn't bear out that people are any happier. People who mindfully employ relationship skills in their everyday interactions, they are happier, they fight less, they're better connected to their loved ones. They tend to feel better understood by the people that they're in relationships with because they know how to communicate their needs and their feelings and their desires in a way that the other person can digest and then respond to appropriately. And they don't age into curmudgeons. There's so many psychological benefits to trying. And I I see the micro marriage as the fuel source for the motivation, not the solve, but the fuel source. I think it inherently creates the motivation that we need to show up as our better selves because people are usually pretty good up until the point that they get married, even a couple years into the
Mhm.
marriage. That's
Yeah.
most people don't divorce immediately after marriage.
Yeah.
It's a slow decline.
I also think that while comfort is really important and being comfortable in a relationship, I think comfort in general is death to a lot of things. Like if you're too comfortable, you're not growing. You're not being challenged to show up as our best self because we're comfortable at where we currently are. And let's be real, not everyone is their best self all the time. So to just show up in your relationship one way because you're comfortable, that doesn't work. I don't think that would ever work.
A
Um,
modicum of pressure is
yeah,
not bad. I would say it's
no,
not bad. Diamonds are created under pressure. That might be too much pressure. I wouldn't necessarily volunteer for that. Um, Although one could argue that being the brand ambassador for relationships essentially put me in a position where I feel that level of pressure.
you know what you're
I,
doing.
but I will tell you, I mean, in the darkest moments of our relationship, that was not even an option.
You
Offering
and
to be in a
Steph?
relation, yeah, not even an
Yeah.
option. Somebody's got to be the hope. There's a
Yeah.
bigger purpose. My marriage isn't just about us, although it's mostly about us. There's a bigger purpose.
Yeah.
And I saw what happened with the last divorce. Well, the only divorce. There will only be one. I saw what happened. I saw the devastation on the people around me. I was not even the brand ambassador for love at that point. And I don't want to be the brand ambassador for love. I can be the brand ambassador for like cranky pragmatism, as it
Relationship
pertains to
skills.
relationships. Yeah. Yeah.
Skills.
I'm going to stay in that lane.
So we've talked about the benefits of a micro marriage, but what are the potential downsides or challenges to this?
I'm sure you can imagine that there could be an imbalance in the investment of the relationship. So you want to make sure that you're both entering a micro marriage for the same reason and not because one person is like a commitment phobe or
Mm,
one person is unsure. This is not a test drive for a relationship. This is
okay.
two people who would otherwise be prepared to get engaged, move in together, or get married. And instead of making an indefinite commitment to each other, they would just be making a time limited commitment to each other. There's ruptures all the time in relationships. People unintentionally or stupidly betray one another. I don't have to tell you about that.
Yeah.
Episode one.
Yeah.
And so when something like that happens, then you have a situation where if both partners are interested in repairing the relationship, then the one who fucked up is in a position kind of being on probation. That's not what this is. This is a situation where two people who would otherwise, they're very happy together. They want to bump the relationship up to the next level. And instead of doing that, in an open-ended way, they clarify how long they're doing this for. And there's a date by when they're going to reassess.
Hmm. So, would you recommend that people start off with a micro marriage and then transition into a more committed traditional relationship structure?
Let me just start by saying that you should do whatever makes you happy. That's basically my answer to most things in life.
Mhm.
However, a micro commitment, if that is working for you, why would you stop? Why would you then turn that into something different? I don't expect people in micro commitments or micro marriages or micro relationships to literally be thinking that the date by when they're going to reevaluate is the off ramp, because we have, it's not a sexy analogy, but we have annual reviews every year. Most people don't imagine that review as being the point at which the relationship's going to end.
Right.
It's the point at which you reset. You get
Yeah.
clarity on how
And
happy
you
you're making
grow.
one another. Right. You
Right.
get
You've been
feedback.
promoted. You get another 5 years.
That's exactly right. So in answer to your question, it's not like I want people to think of this as intending not to be. As long as you're happy, stay together, keep doing it. If a micro marriage is working for you, then I don't understand why you would stop doing it. To me, that feels like joining the gym, getting that hot body, and then being like, I achieved it. I am done. I'm going to
Right.
quit the gym now. And then wondering why you went back to the old wardrobe. You went back to the old wardrobe because you stopped doing what works. When you enter into this conceptual paradigm that I'm proposing, I don't see it as a way to avoid a forever relationship. I actually see it as the fuel source for that.
I like that backgrounder, because I feel like when people hear the word micro marriage, they're probably gonna be like, oh, this sounds like people who are commitment phobes or avoidant. But talking about it more, it really makes it seem like a more feasible concept, especially in this day and age. So, speaking of feasibility, and this could be subjective, but what's an example of a fair duration of time to set a micro marriage? Like, are we talking months? Are we talking years? What does that even look like?
Well, since I'm playing God here, here's what I imagine. I imagine that you have to give yourselves enough time so that each partner has a chance to express their needs and for the other to accommodate their needs. So I'm thinking like at least a couple years. Remember, this is about making bite-sized commitments, not one partner like working their way out of a probationary period. That could be weeks or months, but I don't see this being weeks or months. I see it being, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, something like that. Long enough so that people have a chance to test drive it and to learn how to accommodate each other and to remain mindful of what it is that they're committing to, which we'll
Mhm.
get to in a little while.
So, can a micro marriage apply to a serious relationship and also just the start of new relationships? And I want to preface this question by saying I feel like currently all I'm fed or that I see on social media, movies, books, poems, whatever, is this idea that when you meet someone, like you just know. And there's this supposed to be this level of certainty, like they're the one. I know. And I really struggle with this because I do think that when you meet people, there are certain things that you inherently feel and know. But I'm also like, is it worse to know and be certain at the beginning of a relationship and then have it slowly trickle away, or be in a relationship, know things are great, you really love and care about this person, but you're not sure about forever, and then maybe have that certainty come later? I just feel like the dialogue around love and marriage in pop culture and even just in traditionally is a bit skewed, in the sense that when you know, you know. But what if we
Mm-hmm.
don't? Like, what if we don't and it takes time? Is there something wrong with that?
And also, what would be interesting, an interesting research study, is to go back to a huge population a big pool of people who've been divorced and ask those partners,
Mm.
were you sure at the beginning?
Yeah.
Because literally, I have to imagine that there is a percentage of people who get divorced who were certain,
Right.
who were
Totally.
absolutely certain. And so, like, let's
Right.
hit it hard for 6 months and we'll see how it goes.
Maybe that would help lighten the overall sentiment of my generation around dating, around commitment. I feel like my generation is very commitment phobic, or they enter a commitment and they don't take it seriously and they do things like cheat on you, don't put an effort, aren't showing up. Like they don't understand what it really means to be a partner. And I think it's fair. Like, it's
Yeah.
fair.
First, I want to say that it's intergenerational. It's not just your generation. My generation, the generations before, people were always doing fucked up things. People were always avoiding commitments. As women's rights have evolved in the last 50 years, 40 years, women have joined men in their hesitation to enter commitments. I mean, like, let's call it what it is. Guys have avoided relationships since the beginning of fucking time. They have always done this. And now what we're seeing with women's rights and equality is that women who can stand on their own 2 feet and no longer crave a man out of a sense of necessity
Mm-hmm.
are often more reticent to enter into a relationship themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This has been going on my whole life, my whole dating life. So that's point one. Point two is this. There is no certainty with relationships, Ashton. And people who
Right.
are going to tell you that, they're just people who land on this concept of certainty very easily. They're not people who actually, because they don't have a crystal ball any more than you do. Relationships are essentially about holding each other's hands, closing your eyes, and jumping and hoping for the best. You have a better chance of your parachute opening if you've learned relationship skills and if you've done your own work. But there is no certainty in human behavior, particularly two separate humans who come from different histories, different worlds, and are going to age over
Mm-hmm.
decades together.
Yeah.
There's no certainty. We don't know how we're going to grow and change, and neither
No.
do they. They don't either.
And while I think like you can have certainty in the fact that like you love somebody or that you have love for them, again, love is not always enough. So I think that we might just be changing a dynamic here, a perspective of love. I mean, of marriage. I'm like really into this conversation and this topic.
I'm so surprised, Ashton. I expected you to rail against it. Because in many ways you're quite traditional.
I wouldn't say traditional. I would say that like you mentioned earlier, I'm a bit of a hopeless romantic. Like I was born and raised on Disney movies, and I was like, where is my Prince Charming? But I'm also very hyper independent, and I'm very aware that as time changes, growth happens and people change. I'm a completely different person emotionally and mentally than I was a year ago. And to look at somebody even now and be like, yeah, I can for sure commit to you forever is a crazy concept to me, even if I want it in that moment. It doesn't, I can only see past a certain extent. Like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Because you're being logical and honest.
Right.
Because that's all any of us can do, if
Yeah.
we're to be honest.
And I think there has to be a balance of logic, hopeless romanticism, and hope. And I think this is like a happy medium, because what else are you supposed to do? Like, and this has been a struggle for me the past like couple of months, even exiting my last relationship, which is coming close to a year now. Everyone wants to think they can find the one, and they know, and it's there, and there's no question. But that's not always going to be true forever. Even if you feel it in a certain extent of time, doesn't mean you're going to feel it forever. And I feel like if this was talked about more and made less taboo, things wouldn't be the way that they are surrounding a lot of relationships and the concept of marriage.
It's so binary, and it doesn't need to be. We hate all binaries. Right now in 2024, any thought leader is talking about it's all about the nuance. It's all about the gray matter.
Like
it is.
Yeah.
It is. So why aren't we critically examining the binary concept of marriage in America and in the Western world?
Speaking of that, do you think that there will be a certain level of judgment from others about, well, duh, that was like a rhetorical question.
No, no,
Um,
I wasn't laughing at you. I was imagining the backlash. I was like, oh, it's coming. It's
well,
coming.
it's like,
Yeah.
do you like, okay, I would love a wedding. Like, I think weddings are so fun and beautiful. So it's like, do you then throw a wedding, like, come to our micro wedding? We're going to do this for 3 years. But then you have an excuse to throw another one. And that's so fun. Maybe not on like a grandiose scale where everyone has to spend money and fly out, but like, shouldn't you always be celebrating love? Like, that's an accomplishment. That is something to celebrate.
So what I heard you just do is work through a whole process where you thought of something as going to be a loss and then it wound up being a win at the end.
I was
You
like,
don't have to
wait.
give up wedding. You don't have to give up but also when you think about the pressure around a wedding day
Oh,
and the cost and the like just the
stress.
intense stress and cost of it.
Yep.
What if you broke that down into smaller gatherings and we didn't just have to get together twice in a lifetime, once when you get married and then when we put you in the ground? What if we
Yeah.
came together more often?
What if we celebrated people's love more than just on their wedding day? I think it's also like part of the reason why I love weddings so much is because I love seeing the community of people support the love in the relationship. Like, I think it's beautiful when people tell stories, they show old photos, they talk about the couple, what they love about them. Like, I think that it's nice to have external recognition as well. And to be in a successful relationship is an accomplishment. I mean, the longer you go, the more impressive it is. But I think that concept is like really amazing.
But to your point, should we expect judgment? Yeah, I would imagine we should expect judgment. But if you think about it, Ashton, any marriage that ends in divorce is technically a micromarriage, right? It winds up being a micromarriage by default.
Yeah.
And if I think about other taboos that we've had in society that now seem just like things that make us yawn, prenups used to be
Yeah.
inconceivable. They are essentially sorting out the terms of a divorce that partners agree to before they get married. And we
Mhm.
even have postnups, which are, that's a prenup that you sign after you get married. It's the same concept. So marriage is a social construct. It was never a biological imperative, though women did have an evolutionary advantage back not even hundreds of years ago, probably 100 years ago, when they were attached to a man for life. But today, it is entirely elective and an expression of our social fabric. And I'm just saying that maybe we need to update the look of that fabric. I mean, make it a little bit more trendy in 2024.
We've
I don't,
updated almost everything else. Why would we not do that? Relearning how we approach love and marriage and commitment as a society is so important because, again, look at the divorce rates. Look at the people who are products of divorce. Like, why do we want to keep that? Why would we not challenge that?
we have a
Um,
lot of walking wounded. We have a lot of people who
Absolutely.
are limping through life because they were either affected by a divorce or in a divorce themselves.
Or worse, not worse, but arguably they were a product of an unhappy marriage that didn't get divorced.
Worse. I'm going to argue that that's worse. People, and I say this to people, they don't like to hear it. Kids would rather come from a broken home than be stuck in a broken home.
Coming from one, I agree because at least there's an out. Like, you don't have to brace yourself every time you go home or wait for a door to slam or raise voice, like tension. You don't have to live in the tension. I mean, it'll be there at certain points, but like at least it's not permeating the space every moment of the day.
At least it's not constantly there. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
nothing worse than walking into a home and bracing yourself for it, either because you're part of a relationship that really needs healing
hmm,
or separating, or because you live in the house where that's going on and it's not being addressed. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So how would you guide somebody or a couple who's interested in suggesting, oh, actually, this would be an individual, because I guess one person would have to broach the topic first because it's not widely known, who's interested in suggesting a micro marriage to their partner.
One of the most valuable and toughest aspects of prepping for my wedding with Steph was deciding the language that went into our ketubah, which is the Jewish wedding contract. It's something that you sign at the wedding. It's a religious document. And I don't want to say it's like writing your vows. It's more like negotiating the relationship's mission statement or the principles that the two of you want to commit to together. So going through the process of imagining which values that we each wanted to commit to honoring over time. So I would say that going through that kind of exercise was both miserable but so important before making that commitment leap that we made, so that you both know what's important to you guys as individuals, and then you can come together. You're clear, you have clarity on the criteria that you're each going to be evaluated through at the date by when you're going to evaluate whether or not you want to continue the relationship. It's important to know what each of you expects of the other. Otherwise, it's really hard to meet expectations. So, like, it'd be like taking a job where there's no job description and just hoping that you're telepathically going to deliver. And then, I've never found it easy to meet expectations that weren't painfully clear to me at the outset. So, how do you figure out your shared values? Well, you do it individually by taking the VIA survey of character strengths, which I will link to in the show notes. Each of you take it individually and then come together, look at each other's top 5 strengths, which wind up being your top 5 character strengths, your top 5 values and principles, the ones that matter the most to each of you. And then decide together which of those values that you have in common you guys want to adopt as a couple. And these are things that you want to remain consistent over time. And this is the criteria that you're each going to use to figure out whether you want it to go on when you meet at the mutually decided upon time. So then pick a length of time that feels long enough that you're going to remain cognizant of what you've committed to, but not so far out so that by the time you get there, if one of you's been unhappy, you're like ready to tap out. To me, that seems like, if I were to give one tip on how to begin a micro marriage or micro relationship or micro commitment, whatever term you want to use, that would be the one takeaway that I would encourage people to engage in. That's an exercise that's important for bumping up any relationship to the next level.
I also think, like, and I know this is something that you and Steph used to do. I don't know if you still do this, but like the relationship check-ins or like the meetings. And
we had it yesterday. Thursdays at 3:00.
I love that concept because oftentimes we may feel like we have something that we want to say to our partner, but the setting, the time, the place, their emotional mood, they may not be prepared to hear something. It's not always a great time. And when you have dedicated time to talk about your relationship, I feel like both people are coming a bit more prepared and in the lens of, okay, I'm ready to talk about this. Like, I know what I want to say. I'm open to hearing what you need to say. And I don't think enough people do that, which, you know, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's like, I have monthly touch bases with my boss, where it's not even like performance based. She's just checking on me and like,
It's
how are
so
you feeling?
It's
What
so
do you
smart for
need?
retention. Yep.
And I appreciate it so much. And I know going into it, it's not like an evaluation. It's like literally it's my time with her to talk about my concerns, how I'm feeling. And then I can in turn ask her, okay, am I doing anything that you want to flag to me or whatever? And the check-in doesn't need to serve as like a brace for impact for criticism. It could also be a great moment to like lift up somebody and be like, oh, I really wanted to take the time to tell you, you've been doing great at this. I loved this or whatever. And
Or you as the employee can tell your supervisor, so I've been having trouble with this kind of situation. It's shown up twice with 2 clients. And then the supervisor can be like, here's how I would handle that.
Mhm.
And it's like there's nothing punitive happening. It's
Right.
almost like you're meeting with a mentor who's
Mhm.
helping you to problem solve so that you can be happier and more effective in your job. Yeah, we do the relationship meeting every single week.
Oh,
We
it's
have
weekly?
we cancel 1 or 2 a month, okay? It happens.
I
But we
think that's
still
fine.
hit 2 to 3 a month, almost every month.
That's
And
great.
they're so connecting. There's a certain structure that we use when we do it. And
Do you have
maybe we
like an
should have,
agenda?
of course. No, you have to, because Ashton, you're laughing at me because you know how crazy I am, but literally think about how important an agenda would be for that. If the other partner doesn't know what you're going to bring up, they're blindsided. Sure, they're kind of grounded because they know it's the relationship meeting, but wouldn't it be better to have a couple of hours or a couple of days to think through how you want to engage in a conversation on a
Well,
topic that you weren't prepared for?
yeah, but I also feel like it should just be like an evergreen structure. Like you talk about how you're feeling, the other person's feeling, anything bothering you, anything that you love. But fair. But then again, how much time do you allot for these meetings?
1 hour, and that's
Okay.
part of the reason why you can only have one agenda per meeting.
Who
There's a
makes the
way
agenda?
you guys just like I
Or do you come with your own
manage.
agendas?
Can you imagine I don't manage that part of it? There's a part of something that I give to clients that I do not micromanage, and that's it. I'm like, only one of you gets to put an agenda item on the agenda each week. You guys figure that out. But you start off with a feel-good exercise that takes like 5-10 minutes, and you end with a different one that also makes you feel good. And in between, you can talk about a serious topic. But if one person's got an agenda item up, you don't add another one, because one of the most important aspects to walking away from a serious conversation feeling good is feeling like you got to resolve it. And if you got 10 things on an agenda, both people are going to feel like you're just chipping the surface of each thing, and you're not going to get to the last 4 things anyway. So better to fully resolve something by limiting it. And when you have a regular meeting, you shouldn't be bursting at the seams to like projectile vomit requests, gripes, or needs to one another, because it should be happening. The whole essence of it is that it happens consistently enough that shit doesn't pile up.
I hope someone listening to this who's in a relationship tries this, employs it. I know whenever I get into my next relationship, micro or macro, I will be requesting that be implemented, because we have meetings for everything else that requires work.
I have a template and a video walkthrough for you when you're ready for that, Ashton. And you know where it lives, on a fucking Google Doc.
I had no doubt. Oh,
you want to read us out?
We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling is a Sterling Standard production. This episode was produced by Darcy Sterling. Editing and sound engineering by Bart McGow. Our theme music is by Trending Music. Special thanks to Amanda Christiani, Preston Smith, and Stephanie Sterling. If you know someone who hasn't just gotten married or engaged, please share this episode with them. We'll be back on Tuesday with another episode packed with the relationship, dating, and mental health hacks you've come to expect. References, as always, are linked in the show notes.
Thank you, Ashton.
Thank you.